Hello, Room 10. Today's lesson is all about decimals, and more importantly, changing fractions into decimals. Decimals and fractions both help represent parts of a whole. The most common way you will see decimals used are money, for example, with the dollar sign, the dollars representing the wholes, and the cents representing parts of a whole. We also looked at decimals in terms of time. In class, we watched a 100-meter Olympic final and saw that the runners were often separated not by seconds, but by tenths or hundredths of a second. The same was true in a swimming race we watched in class as well. What I'm going to try to show today are some patterns and methods for changing tenths and hundredths into decimals, and I think you'll start to see some patterns that will help you with more difficult problems. Our first problem here, 7/10. When we're looking at a number, for example, 112 and 56 hundredths, everything to the left here, these are our whole numbers. 112.56 or 112 and 56 hundredths is a little more than 112, but a little less than 113. This 5 right here, this is our tenths place. And the 6th right here, this is our hundredths place. So when we're looking at a problem like 7/10, we're looking to put that 7 in the tenths place. Now 7/10 is less than a whole, so I've been teaching the kids it's good to go ahead and fill that ones place there with a 0, and we simply put the 7 in the tenths place to represent 7/10. Same would follow with 3/10, which is less than a whole. So we take the 3 and put it in the tenths place. Now with the following three problems, we're dealing with hundredths. So it's still less than a whole, so we have our 0 to hold the ones place. And our 12 just simply follows the decimal point to represent 12 hundredths. I know the 2 is technically in the hundredths place, but the 12 itself is read as 12 hundredths. Following the patterns, this would be 74 hundredths. This one is a tricky one for many when they first are learning this. If we put this 8 right after the decimal, we'll be putting it in the tenths place. We need to make sure it's in the hundredths place, which is over here, and we use a 0 to hold the place in between. Now the next step, and the kids have done this as well, is changing mixed numbers like 3 and 7/10 or 4 and 12 hundredths into decimals. The same logic applies. 7/10 is still going to go in the tenths place, but instead of having 0 wholes, we now have 3, and here is our 7/10. 4 and 12 hundredths isn't 0.12, it's 4.12. If we have any whole number out in front, we just put it on to the left where the whole numbers go. Now today we tackled fourths and halves, which presents an interesting problem because kids have gotten real comfortable with where to put numbers in decimals when we're using tenths and hundredths, but we're a little bit puzzled when we did fourths and halves. But they had all the knowledge they needed in the practice that we've done. I'm going to actually start with a half here. The key to solving these problems is to get a fraction that has 10 or 100 in the denominator. We've been working endlessly on equivalent fractions, and I know to get this to tenths, I just need to multiply my denominator by 5. Since it's an equivalent fraction, I have to do the same thing to the top if I want it to remain equal, and this now becomes 5/10. Now I know from doing these problems right here, 5/10 is less than a whole, and the 5 goes in the tenths place. So this turns into 0.5. Now fourths, I can't turn fourths into tenths. because when I count by 4, 4, 8, 12, I skip 10. 4 is not a multiple of 10. Or excuse me, 10 is not a multiple of 4. But I can turn fourths into hundredths. And I know that's done by multiplying both the numerator and denominator by 25. So if I multiply the top by 25, I will get 25 hundredths. Understanding these problems over here, I know 25 hundredths can be written as 0.25. Last but not least, 3/4. Again, I can't turn this into tenths, but I can turn it into hundredths. Just like up above, we're going to multiply both of them. We're going to multiply both of them by 25. 4 times 25 is 100. 3 times 25 is 75. And this can be written as 0.75 or 75 hundredths. One last thing we talked about is another way to say 3/4 is to say 3/4. And if I were to have 3/4 in my hand, I would have 75 cents, which is this is another way to write money. The same applies if we have a mixed number, for example, 15 1/4, 15 1/4. The 15 will remain on the left side. And I know now that 1/4 is always going to be 0.25 or 25 hundredths, so it'll be written this way. As kids move on to 5th and 6th grade, they'll start using fractions outside of halves and fourths. But for now, if you can remember that fourths are always 0.25 and halves are always 0.5, you should be a step ahead of the game. If not, you can always remember to turn your fractions into tenths or hundredths. That is the key to writing decimals for fractions that don't have 10 or 100 as a denominator. Hope this helps. Thanks.